Okay, so I just wanted to do this video to explain how I used irrational numbers to write this song. The song is called Irrational. I'm going to do my best to try to explain this so everyone can understand, meaning those who don't know much about music and music theory. But if I don't cover something very clearly, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment sections and I will answer it. Or most people who are watching this probably know me, so feel free to call me or email me. So here is a list of the numbers that I used, the irrational numbers. The first one is pi. That's the one I use the most, and I'm sure most people know what pi is. And then the square root of 2, and then e, which is Euler's number, and then tau, which is 2 pi, and the golden ratio. And if you don't know any of these, look them up on YouTube. There's a lot of really good videos out there about it. Okay, so we'll start with the main riff. That's that little keeps coming back throughout the song. I used E and pi to come up with that riff. I used pi for the pitches, and how I did that is I assigned a note per number using the C major scale. So it's all based off of the C major scale, which is, instead of thinking of it as C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, think of it as numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. We're back to C, which is the same as 1. So 1 and 8 are the same, and 2 and 9, D, are the same. And then the only other number we didn't cover is 0, and I just made 0 a wild card, which means whenever 0 popped up, I could just choose whatever note I wanted. So we have 3, 1, 4. So that's going to be E, C, F. So those are the notes, those are the pitches of the riff. 3, 1, 4. Now for E, Euler's number, I used that to determine how many times I would play each note of pi. So the first note, the 3 or the E, I'd play that 2 times. The second note, the C or the 1, I play that 7 times. And the F or the 4, I play that 1 time. So that's 2, 7, 1, which is Euler's number. Okay, so the next section, letter A, I use pi. I use 42 digits of pi, and I use 16 digits of the square root of 2. Now for the melody, I used it the same as before. I just let each note represent a number, and then I just picked the numbers from pi, and that gave me the melody. Now for the chords is where I use the square root of 2. And I use the same concept. You know, a C chord would be 1, D minor is 2, E minor is 3, F major is 4, so on and so forth. So the first 4 numbers of the square root of 2 are 1, 4, 1, 4. So I had a 1 chord, then a 4 chord, then a 1, then a 4. Now obviously on the video and when I wrote this, I added more color to the chords. It just wasn't a C triad. I think it was a C6-9, and the 4s were F7s. But it was all pretty much diatonic as far as the chords go. Like the 2s were minor, the 3s were minors, the 5s were major, so on and so forth. One other thing I'd like to mention in this section for all the jazzers that are watching, if you notice the third from last number of the square root of 2, that's a 0. So that was a wild card I got to choose. And if you look at the chord before it, it was a 3, and the chord after it, it's a 9, which is the same thing as a 2. So I chose a 6 there, which gave me a 3, 6, 2, 5 chord progression leading back to the 1. Okay, next we have letter B, and I used pi, and I used E, Euler's number, and I used 22 digits of E. So first we have pi. So if you notice, for the chords, the first chord, the F sharp major 7, I played it for 3 measures, and then the next chord, the D7 over A, is 1 measure, and then the next chord, the B flat minor 7, that's 4 measures, and the G major 7 is 2. So that's 3, 1, 4, and then 2. This time I rounded up because the next digit after it would normally be 3.141, and then the next digit is 5, which would technically round the 1 up to a 2. So here again, took a few liberties. Now pi is also in the rhythm in this section in a couple places. If you look at the rhythm that I have notated there in the 5th measure, that's the rhythm that the band's playing, and I know some of the non-music people may not get this terminology, but you'll be able to hear it here in a minute. If you notice, there's 3 notes, then 1 note, then 4 notes. So there's pi again, 3, 1, 4. Now the bass and the bass clarinet are actually playing that rhythm from the very top of that section. It's just the rest of the band join them there at the 5th bar of the section. Now I used E, Euler's number, to come up with the melody of the section. Now this is E, and I did this in 3 number blocks. So I took the first 3 numbers, which are 2, 7, 1, and I looked up what frequency that was in hertz. 271 hertz, and that was about a C sharp. So I rounded it to a C sharp. Then I moved it over 1 number to 718 hertz, and that was around an F. And then 182 hertz, and that was around an F sharp. Then 828 hertz was around a G sharp. Then 281 hertz, and that was around a C sharp. And I just went on and on and on until I got enough notes to formulate the melody. Okay, for letter C, I used pi and tau. For pi, I used it in a couple different ways. First, the bass line. If you notice, there are groupings of 3 notes, then 1 note, then 4 notes, then 1 note. So basically, the bass line is. Now, I also used pi in the sax melody in a couple ways. The first way, here again, is the number of notes I played. Now, non-musicians, you might have a hard time seeing this if you don't read music. But if you notice the first phrase, there's 3 notes, and then the second phrase is just 1 note. Then the third phrase is 4 notes. Then the fourth phrase is 1 note, and then the last phrase is 5 notes. So there we have pi again, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5. Now another way that I used pi in the sax melody is I used the same concept before where I assigned a note per number, but instead of doing it on a C major scale like before, I did it on a chromatic scale, so every note. And also instead of starting at 1, I started at 0. So C was 0, C sharp was 1, D was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. And then when you get to 10, that's B flat. Now, anytime a 1 showed up followed by a 0, I used a B flat, it was a 10. Or if it was followed by another 1, it was an 11, so it was a B. But if it was followed by any other number, then it just counted as a 1, in which case it was a C sharp. So I used that system and used the numbers from pi to come up with the melody that I played on the sax. I used that system and the numbers of tau to come up with the melody that I played on the bass clarinet, the thing that's kind of going on in the background. So since this is based on the chromatic scale, that's kind of why it sounds kind of outside or atonal. There's really no tonal center in that section. Okay, the last section, letter D, which is the solo section, I used pi, and there's two instances of pi. First, the bass line. Here again, use the same concept as before, where I assigned a note per number, but this time, instead of a major scale, I did it on a minor scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 or 9. I mean 8 or 1, and then 9 or 2. So I used that and used pi, except I used an exception here. I started on 1. I started with 1 and then started pi. So 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, and then we're back to 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 1, so on and so forth. So that's the bass line. Now the second occurrence of pi was actually a contribution by Marcus, the drummer. And it's really subtle. You have to listen real close. But if you listen in the first half of the solo section, if you listen to what he's playing on the snare drum and the kick drum, the interplay between the two, he's doing, here again, it's groupings of notes. There's a group of 3 notes, then 1 note, then a group of 4 notes, then 1 note, then a group of 5 notes, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5. And again, you have to listen because it's subtle, but it is there. So I'm going to play a little bit of the track, and I'm going to solo Marcus's kit just for a few measures, just so you can listen and see if you can hear it. And then I'll bring in the rest of the instruments so you can hear the section. Okay, so the final irrational number I haven't talked about is the golden ratio. Now here is a chart that I kind of drew up as I was writing the song, and that I was trying to decide how I wanted the form to be. And I wanted the form to be laid out in a way that the golden ratio occurred throughout it several times. And this is initially how the song was. So this is how the chart reads. That horizontal line, the solid line, that is the timeline for the song. The letters in the boxes, the R is the riff, and then there's letter A, letter B, those are the different sections. And the numbers that are sitting on the line, those are the number of measures each section is. And then the brackets that are pointing to that little symbol, that symbol is phi, that's the golden ratio. And every time you see one of those brackets, that's an occurrence of the golden ratio. So for example, the first 2 sections, we have 10 measures and 16 measures. Well, if you divide 16 by 10, that gives you 1.6, and the golden ratio is 1.618. So every place, like I said, every place you see one of those, that's an occurrence of the golden ratio. Now, I ended up doubling the solo section there at letter D. It was initially 16 measures, but I made it 32. I just felt like 16 measures was too short for that section. And here again, this is why this was more of a compositional tool rather than a strict framework to stick within. So when I doubled that section, it basically eliminated 6 different occurrences of the golden ratio. And unfortunately, one of them, which it's the very bottom one you see there, that is the one that's the whole song. The whole song, if you took the first part of the song up through letter D and divided that by the number of measures in the second part of the song, that was the golden ratio. I think the first half, you can see there at the bottom, was 68 measures, and the second part was 42 measures. And if you divide those, you get 1.619. So it was close. But nonetheless, there are still several occurrences of the golden ratio throughout the song. Well, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the song and the explanation, and I really enjoyed doing this. I'm considering doing more. using more math ideas, maybe even some physics ideas, and just different ways to get me in a different mindset for writing music. So feel free to leave any comments or suggestions or ideas, and thank you guys so much.